Hey friends, Vanessa Fernandez here, and welcome to Coaching Conversations. Today's conversation is about spiritual practices. Okay, what do I mean by this? So first of all, let me say what I'm not saying. I do not believe that the Enneagram is something that you have to have a specific religious background or belief system in order for it to be useful for you. I think the Enneagram is expansive and transcends and can be applied to any and every spiritual belief system. I do think that the Enneagram is meant to be a tool for spiritual transformation. And I've talked about this before, where the Enneagram is like a map. Shows us where we're at, shows us where we want to go, shows us how we move so we can plot a path and we can plot a route to transformation, to growth, to freedom. Right? Freedom is the growth that we're searching for with Enneagram work. We want to be free from the armor of our Enneagram type. Our Enneagram type is like our way of making our way through the world, and then we outgrow it and it becomes restrictive, and until we kind of let it fall away and step into our true selves, then that armor, it hurts, it makes life more difficult. We have those pain points. And often when people reach out to me wanting coaching, it's because they're feeling the pain point of their armor being too small for them. So we can identify it. And I could definitely be one of those life coaches that tells you how to keep on your armor and just try different things so that it doesn't hurt so bad. But I'm not that kind of coach. I'm the kind of coach that says, we're going to take this armor off, my friend. You don't need it anymore. And that requires a spiritual expansion. That requires believing that we are safe and we are held in a spiritual sense. And so I think there are many different religions that speak, well, every religion, or spiritual belief, even spirituality and its belief of the universe and source energy and a higher power, all different names for the same thing. And so when we study the Enneagram and we figure out the map, well, the taking the steps along the journey are spiritual practices. The spiritual practices is us actually moving into action, right? Because I could give you a great plan. I could map it out. I could show you where you are, where you want to go, how you move, all the things. And until you step out your front door, go on the journey and follow the map, none of it is helpful. And the stepping out of the door is spiritual practices. So what are those spiritual practices? Okay, first of all is self-observation. Self-observation is a spiritual practice because there has to be some sort of spiritual belief that I'm safe enough to observe myself without judgment. When we don't feel safe and we don't feel loved, then we have to criticize ourselves and we have to protect ourselves and we have to decide whether what we're doing is right or wrong. And if it's right, we're safe. And if it's wrong, we're not safe. But when we remember that we are safe regardless, then we can just do what we do, be who we are, observe what we're doing, and just say, my favorite phrase is, that's interesting. Oh, look at that. My child did X, Y, and Z, and I responded like this. And rather than saying, I responded wrong, I responded in anger, I responded out of fear, I just responded with a loud voice or tears or my body started tensing up, whatever it is I'm noticing, that's interesting. That's interesting that that event triggered that response, and now I'm just observing it without needing to judge or assign any moral value to that. That's a spiritual practice. That is something that takes practice because we are just trained to want to parse out, right? Knowing the boundaries of everything and having everything in nice, neat little boxes makes us feel safe. And again, when we are more reliant and trusting in being held by divine love, we don't need everything to be in a box. We don't need everything to be defined. We don't need everything to be right or wrong, good or bad, left or right, black or white. We can just observe it as it is. And I'm not saying that we never take those observations and say, I would rather have responded in a different manner. Totally fine. Because, again, that's part of the transformation is rather have responded in a different manner. But the minute that we start applying judgment to our self-observation, it is no longer pure, it is no longer efficient, it is no longer effective. Because the minute that we start telling ourselves, you're bad, you did something wrong, that wasn't right, you should have done it better, all of that feels wounding to our psyche. And when our psyche is wounded, a defense mechanism is, I'm not gonna let myself notice that anymore. That's why people who have, experienced a lot of shaming, right? They tend to be not very self-aware, because it's the way for our brains to protect itself from the trauma of constantly feeling ashamed of something. I'm just no longer going to allow myself to be self-aware or notice that. But that's the worst possible thing. That puts us back in darkness. So this is where having self-compassion is so important and such a good spiritual practice. I'm going to observe my behavior without any type of judgment. That's spiritual practice number 1. Spiritual practice number 2 is I am going to get curious. I'm going to get curious about what's happening. I'm going to wonder why. Wonder what's contributing. Wonder what motivations are birthing that reaction. Every reaction is a reaction because we're experiencing some sort of fear, some sort of belief of lack, some sort of belief of not enough. So shame, fear, justice, those 3 triads, we're going to experience something like that, and then we're going to react. If there's chaos, I need to make it peaceful for type 9s. If someone is taking advantage of someone else, I need to make it right. Justice of the 8s. If something is not right, I need to fix it. The type 1s needing to be good and right? Every type, you can go all the way around the circle, every type is reacting to a fear in a sense of there being a lack in the world. And so the more we get curious, the more we settle into our particular flavor of lack. Our particular flavor, one of my favorite phrases in the Enneagram of describing how our types manifest is, it's 9 different ways of our souls twisting away from divine source love, divine source abundance, right? When we twist away, we say there's lack. I've twisted away, I've cut myself off like a water hose that's been twisted. There's plenty of source water coming through, but when the water hose is twisted, nothing is coming out the other end. And there's a perception of lack. There's a perception of not enough, right? So when we get curious, we start figuring out, what's my flavor of lack? What's my flavor of being twisted from divine source love? And these are giving us tools then to start untwisting. And all we're doing in our spiritual practices is we're not trying to strive for anything. We're trying to allow. We're not trying to make anything happen. I'm not trying to be the best 3 I can be, although I want to. My ego feels like that sounds really good, but the whole spiritual practice is, even the reframing of what the spiritual practice is, it's not a striving, it's an allowing. Right? It's an unblocking. When you untwist that garden hose and nothing is twisted and blocked, you're just allowing the water to rush through. You're just allowing grace to come in. You're just allowing source love to remind you of your worth, of your safety, of your security, of the rightness in the world, of the goodness in the world, of the peace in the world, right? As soon as we untwist, then we allow. And that's what spiritual practice is. Sitting with what is, observing without judgment, getting curious, figuring out what's my flavor of twisting, and then releasing and allowing for source love to come in and transform and bring abundance and bring peace and bring goodness and bring love and bring worth and bring significance and bring competence and bring safety and bring satisfaction and bring justice and bring peace. And we just allow it. We just allow it. So that's what that's why spiritual practices go hand in hand with the Enneagram. And those are just a few. There's more to round out this whole process. I'm doing a class at the end of this week where I talk about specifically meditation or centering prayer. It has many names, but the spiritual practice that quiets the body, the mind, and the soul, and helps for that allowing, helps for that flow, helps for to reconnect with source and let source do its work and get out of the way, right? So I'm gonna go in detail what that looks like, how to practice that, how to start engaging with the spiritual practices, which are stepping out the front door, right? Taking those steps. If we know the map, if we know our Enneagram type, if we know what growth looks like, if we know how we move, now, okay, how do I get out the front door? You do it with spiritual practices. So I'd love to continue this conversation this week. I'll be talking a little bit more about spiritual practices. Hopefully you can join me in the class at the end of the week. It's going to be fabulous and just give you some real tangible. Sometimes when we talk about spirit work, it's like, ooh, spirit work, what does that look like? I'm going to make it tangible for you. Steps, things you can do. Break it down into ways that you can wrap your hands around and start implementing so that you can start feeling that flow, reconnecting to source and expanding and growing and taking off that armor and finding freedom.